Welcome to this special 2024 election coverage episode of Kankakee Podcast, presented by Nana's Bakery and Cakes, Pathfinder, and Stafari West Avenue. I'm Jake LaMore. Before we get started, just to remind you that early voting is now underway if you choose to cast your ballot before November 5th. For more voter information, you can visit KankakeeCountyClerk.com. On this episode, I'll be talking with Amy Kemp from the Vote Yes for BBCHS Committee. We'll be discussing the upcoming referendum on the November 5th ballot for residents of Bourbonnais and Bradley. This referendum is a key issue for the future of Bradley-Bourbonnais Community High School, and today we'll dive into what's at stake and why supporters believe it's so important. So welcome back, Amy.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. So I guess just to get to the nitty gritty, this is actually is this the second time the referendum has been tried to pass in recent years? Am I wrong on that?
It's interesting. It's less recent than you might think.
Okay.
I don't remember the exact date, but it has been over 10 years. Since the last referendum. There is sort of a feeling that has happened a lot.
For some reason, I thought there was another one recently where, Okay.
Yeah, so it's been quite a while.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so I guess just diving into it, what is this referendum for? Let's break it down on what the committee is requesting.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, we're really excited to have the chance to share because our main goal is just to educate people on what the bond would do, what the referendum would provide for students in our community. We believe that we have a great school with below average facilities. And not only are there just structural concerns, but there are real safety concerns as well that this referendum would address. Things like eliminating the portable classroom trailers. Right now, we have 400 students leaving the building every hour to go outside to their classes in these trailers, and they have outlived their life cycle by many years. They've been there now for almost 20 years. And so we have this very porous building because of the limitations of the facility. We also currently have students eating lunches starting at 10:30, going almost until 2 o'clock. And that lack of cafeteria space actually causes tons of academic constraints because of kids' schedules and because of how you've got to fit so many students into such a small, confined cafeteria space. We're also going to be adding 15 new classroom spaces and also some STEM lab spaces. Right now, we can't even offer certain science classes because we don't have adequate lab space in which to offer these classes. You're also adding a pool observation deck, centralizing PE in a field house, and then some really great spaces for our music, orchestra, band, and choir, which are very constrained by space right now. And also moving all of those sort of subject and then like disciplines, so maybe all of the music people into one side of the school so that they're all able to kind of, instead of being spaced out throughout. So it's just really rethinking the space and making better use of what we have.
So I guess there's a couple different questions I have. I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer some of these, but going back to the cafeteria, how many students can the cafeteria hold, and how many students are actually in the school total? Do you know those numbers? That's a great question.
I don't want to give you exact numbers.
If you don't know, that's okay. It's just that popped up in my mind as
I don't know for certain, but I do know, just having been in the space, because we've had some of our meetings in there. We have 2 cafeterias, but both of them are smaller than, for example, the cafeteria space at Liberty. And the school is decidedly bigger. So I know we're just under 2,000, I feel like, for our population right now. But that cafeteria situation, again, like I said, when you talk to anyone who does scheduling at the school, it basically all revolves around not having enough room for our kids to eat lunch.
So it always comes down to the dollar, right? How much is this going to cost? How much is this going to cost people that live in the school district? And I do know that there is a calculator, because this is being added to your property taxes, to be clear. And there is actually a calculator on Vote Yes for BBCHS.com where homeowners can figure out exactly how much more this would add on to their property tax bill. Correct?
Correct. Right. So if you go to Vote Yes for BBCHS.com, you can find there a link. It will say learn more, and then you can take it to a different site that will give you this tax calculator where basically you can put in the value of your home and then do the math to figure out exactly how much it would increase your property taxes each month. But I know, for example, I'll say a $200,000 home, I think it would increase around $25 per month on your property tax bill.
Support for Kankakee Podcast's 2024 election coverage comes from Nana's Bakery and Cakes on Broadway and Bradley. It's more than just cakes and cupcakes. It's the perfect treat for every occasion. Find them on Facebook and Instagram and visit nanascakery.com. So I think it's important for voters to know as they're deciding what to do, whether to vote yes or no on this referendum, is the financial stake. Now, the school district is putting in so much money into these upgrades, and then the rest of it is the bond or the referendum that the taxpayers will be responsible for. So what's the breakdown for that?
The total amount for the bond referendum is $70 million. The school district has put in $8 million. So what we're asking voters to vote yes for is $62 million.
Okay.
I also think it's important to think about this financial decision from a long-term perspective in terms of our property values and what an updated facility brings to the value of our homes as people are deciding whether to live in our community, and how the building and the facility plays a part in that. I do think if we're thinking about the future for our children and their children, this investment is well worth it.
And you bringing that up, in my mind, leads me to the fact of a question I've seen floating around a lot that's being asked: why not build a new school at this point? If we've got all of these things that need to be upgraded, why not build a new facility?
Yes, we asked this question a lot when we first put the committee together in the spring and opened up some meetings for the public to come to. A lot of these questions were raised, and we were given numbers. It would cost more than 3 times what we're asking of taxpayers now to build a facility from the ground up. Another consideration as we had conversations and asked some of these questions was that these improvements are not going to become less expensive down the road. So things like plumbing and electrical upgrades and things that will have to be done are just going to get more expensive as you travel down the road. And so we're just trying to take care of them now and be forward thinking.
Do you think this will set up the school for a while? Is that something you can attest to?
That's the plan.
Okay.
That was what the plans were made with the future in mind. And can we build a facility that will last for decades to come?
And branching off that, you're talking about a brand new building, be 3 times the amount of the $70 million you're asking for in total. What about a facility that already exists that just needs to be refurbished? Apparently, the Cigna building has been come into question quite a few times as well. We all know how ginormous that former Cigna building is in Bourbonnais on Route 45 North. And there's been several residents asking, well, why can't we purchase that building and refurbish it to meet what BBCHS needs?
We asked the same question, wanting to really make sure that we explored all options. Unfortunately, doing that kind of update to that particular building was going to be just about as expensive as building a new school. There are so many things that go into building a school that you don't think about that have to be considered. And so it's very difficult to take an existing structure and turn it into a school, and very expensive.
I think there's something that needs to be said about security and safety. That's what a lot of this money is going to go towards. And considering the school was built in the 1950s, if I'm not mistaken, obviously entrances and things like that, and the overall school security was a lot different back then versus now. And I know that's a big topic of discussion just with all the events that are happening locally around the country. As a parent myself, and I'm sure a parent that is listening right now, yourself included, it is something we fear. To send our kids to school, right? And that's something we should not have to fear for. So if this is going to help with the safety and security of our children, that is definitely something to consider, as well as people are deciding whether to vote yes or no for this referendum. What else would you like to add into this?
Well, this is the reason I'm here. My children are too old to even benefit from this update. They will not be in school anymore by the time it happens. But I think about your kids and what they deserve. And mostly at the top of my mind is safety. And we had, in the exploratory conversations around this referendum, I won't ever forget it, but there was a man who came from our community and he said, I've never voted yes for a referendum in my entire life. But if something happened on our watch, I could never forgive myself. And so I have an open mind. And I think that is the deciding factor for me, is that our building was built for a world that no longer exists, unfortunately, that was a lot more safe. And that having such a porous building where there are so many open entrances and exits, because they have to be, because kids have to be able to leave to go to these external classrooms, opens up the school to so many risks. And we just had a big scare that was in the paper. Everyone heard about it. I just think we're playing with fire if we don't address some of these concerns. And that was really what, for me, was the thing I could not say no when I think about the safety of your kids. I don't care whose kids they are. I want them to be safe, and I could not forgive myself if something happened, and I could vote yes to prevent it.
And talking about those exterior classrooms, this completely eliminates that, just to reiterate?
Okay. Everyone would be under one roof, not having to leave the building for any reason.
So that's already one less thing that security has to look after.
It's so significant. And also, there are many other safety concerns. The hallways are very congested. If something happens, the building is very choppy. Even some of this communication systems, because they're dated, things like that really just need to be addressed so that we have our kids in this. Obviously, no place is 100% safe, but as safe as possible, controlling all the variables that we can control.
Another thing I've heard voters and taxpayers talk about is a lot of them sounded like they understood that this was mainly just to get air conditioning in the whole entire building. And it sounds like this is way beyond making sure the school is completely air conditioned everywhere.
Oh, I didn't realize that. So actually, the school is on its way to already having that done. Thankfully, we got some money from COVID that paid for those upgrades. So the referendum would have needed to be more than actually that part has already been done and will work within this plan. So it's not like you have to tear out all the work that just was done. The systems that were put in place will work, moving forward with what we are proposing.
Okay.
So
that's good to know.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. I thought some of this money might be going towards air conditioning.
It goes to like electrical, plumbing, some other structural things, but the air conditioning project, while they still have a small part of the school, it will be completed next year. That was more just because of timing when school starts and such.
Support for 2024 election coverage on Kankakee Podcast comes from Pathfinder, a full-service creative and marketing agency in downtown Kankakee with a mission to provide strategic storytelling to their clients. Pathfinder's inventive business services and pioneering campaigns help organizations find their own path and carry out their vision. Learn more by visiting yourpathfinder.io. I kind of want to go down some of the frequently asked questions that you have on your website, the Vote Yes, BBCHS.com website, because some of these are very important questions, I feel like, that we need to get out here so people might not have time to go look them up themselves. They can just hear about them right here, right now. And why do we have to do this now? Why can't we do this later, maybe save up some more money? Why does it have to be right now?
Right now, to me, feels important because, as I mentioned earlier, the longer we continue to put this off and kick the can down the road, so to speak, the more expensive it becomes. Even, for example, there was conversation about passing or working to pass this kind of referendum before the pandemic, and the cost now has increased considerably. So at some point, someone's going to need to address what's happening. I just feel like we can't continue to pass that on to the next generation.
And how much of these projects is it going to disrupt any student learning? Is that?
Most of the work will be done when school is out of session, when possible. There will be times and there will be a stretch of time where parts of the building will be inaccessible or they'll have to work around things. But I feel like these architects and the companies that build schools are well prepared to work around school schedules, and they understand, how to make those things work.
Let's say this does pass. What's the timeline for, because I assume there's already been some design work done, because otherwise you wouldn't have this $70 million figure that voters can look at, correct? So when would this start?
Obviously, with all construction projects, all the dates are tentative, but should voters pass the referendum on November 5th, work would begin immediately, not necessarily construction, but the projected dates of completion would be that most of the project would be completed for use in the fall of 2027, and then the rest would be completed by fall of 2028. So again, tentative, but that's the plan as laid out.
Now, what if this referendum does not pass? Then what's going to happen? I mean, I think obviously some of that question is already answered. Well, these upgrades won't happen all at once, or maybe some of them won't happen at all. Maybe it'll be a trickle. I mean, is there a plan in place for if the referendum doesn't pass?
There's not a particular plan in place, but I do know that the board and administrative teams would have some decisions to make, particularly around the trailers that are outdated and have to be replaced. So they would need to make decisions around those spaces, spaces like the science labs, but I don't think there's a specific plan that has been thought through. Right now, we are working and doing everything we can to educate voters and ask them to support this initiative.
Support for this 2024 election episode of Kankakee Podcast comes from Stafari West Avenue, providing contemporary cuisine with an international flair on Southwest Avenue in Kankakee. View their menu and order online at stafaricafe.com. So let's say the referendum passes, you get the funding, but then the prices are not what you thought would be. The economy with the constant price increases and things like that. What would happen at that point if we don't have enough?
Mm-hmm. Well, there are never guarantees in this area, but definitely the current budgets are based on projections of things that we know in construction right now. There are some contingency dollars that allow for unknown expenses, of course. And really, the architects feel very optimistic that this is possible and that they've taken all of that into account.
Does any of the plans that would be in place for the referendum, what does that do to the parking? Mm-hmm. Because that has always been a constant issue at Bradley-Bourbonnais Community High School. I would imagine some of this construction would eliminate some parking spaces.
It does. Part of the plan is to move where the current tennis courts are, kind of to the other side of the football fields, which would open up. And they really, in the plans that we saw, you weren't losing any parking spots. And if anything, it improves the flow of traffic for drop-off times, kind of centralizes one area through which students enter the building and makes bus drop-offs and student drop-offs from parents much more smooth and safe.
Amy Kemp from the Vote Yes for BBCHS Committee, thank you so much for being here. And if anyone has any questions, they can contact the committee and also the website.
Absolutely. Vote Yes for BBCHS.com is a really great resource. And then also on the school website, if you just look under bbchs.org, there's also some information that will be really helpful. We're happy to answer any questions. Again, the vote is your decision. We're just wanting to really have voters be educated on what they're saying yes or no to before they fill in the oval.
Yes. And pretty much everything we talked about is on the website in case you want to look into it further or just obviously reach out to you. If there's something we did not talk about that you have a question about, please don't hesitate to reach out. And then I guess just a reminder, once again, the early voting is now underway, so you don't have to wait until November 5th to vote on this. If you already know, if you've got all your ducks in a row for all the other things you have to vote on this election, you can go ahead and knock that out now if you choose so.
Absolutely. In person or by mail. It's great. Like you said, if you've already made up your mind and you want to make sure you're not getting interrupted by other things on election day or running into crowds, might as well go and cast your ballot now.
Yes. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you for having me.
That concludes our conversation with Amy Kemp from the Vote Yes for BBCHS Committee. We hope this episode gave you a clearer understanding of the referendum and what it could mean for the future of our local high school. As always, we encourage you to do your research and make your voice heard at the polls. Thank you to our sponsors, Nana's Bakery and Cakes, Pathfinder, and Stafari West Avenue for supporting this special election episode. Be sure to stay tuned for more election coverage and local stories here on Kankakee Podcast. I'm Jake LaMore. Thank you for listening.